So recently my Wrangler 2012 started to, or didn't want to start. Whenever we'd crank over the key, we'd hear this. Then you'd only hear the starter turning. I'm pretty sure it's just a bad starter. Picked one up at the parts store, and I'll go through the different steps and install a new one. These are the various tools that I use today. 3/8 driver with a 15mm socket, battery terminal cleaner, flathead screwdriver, 2 different length pry bars. These definitely help with that cable. 10mm and 13mm 1/4 inch pick. I didn't really need this one. I was trying to get a clamp from the harness off. I ended up just cutting that zip tie. 15mm. I used 3 different types of 15mm wrenches. Again, it's a question of space and leverage, and 2 different types of 13mm for the bolt to the starter, and some long needle nose pliers. I tried to pop the harness off, but I ended up just cutting it. So hopefully this helps you. Biggest lesson learned for me today was just use the pry bars to leverage the cable out of the way. It's incredible what a little bit of leverage will do, and after that things went pretty smoothly. So the first thing to do is to disconnect the battery. As you can see here, there's a lot of corrosion, so I'll have to clean that off. So number 10mm, loosen that up. Depending on how long it's been there, you may need a little bit more force. There we go. While I'm here, I'll give it a quick little cleanup so it's ready for reassembly later. So now there's a few clips. So there's a red one here that has to be moved towards the front of the vehicle before it will release. And then there's going to be another one with it, which is bolted, which is the power wire going to the solenoid. So once those 2 are disconnected, I'll then remove these 2 bolts here, and the starter will slide out. So depending on whether or not your Jeep is lifted, these parts may be super easy to access. This one has a 3-inch lift, so there's lots of room. If yours is stock, you'll probably want to have it lifted with jack stands under the frame rails so that the front axle droops down and there's more room between your drive shaft and the starter. Oh, bugger. So of course I did something, in the retaining clip on this side broke, so I'm going to see if I can wiggle my pick into the front and get it under the little hook and just release it. Not sure if the full locking system is disengaged or if it's still partially engaged. When I tried to push it out, it just didn't want to budge. So this is where having the replacement part handy and looking at how the clip is designed does help with trying to figure out how to undo this. Felt it move. See it move a little bit now. It's almost out. It's like a piece of plastic are falling out, and it's out. So I guess the catch there is I'll have to make sure that this is actually latching once I'm done, so that I don't end up with a starter that works when it wants to. So knowing that the wire goes in on this side and there's a little metal or plastic tab here, I knew that this had to go over to release. Now I just got to figure out the size of the nut for the power cable to the solenoid, and then I'll keep going. On the remanufactured starter, the bolt is a 13. So is it on the existing one. So just by virtue of how little space there is, I'm gonna go get a wrench so that I don't end up with a tool that's jammed and not can't be removed. So this bolt is actually facing the front of the vehicle, depending on how you look at it. So just got to be careful that it's less important with the old one, but ideally you don't want to break the plastic. So from past experiences, if you can take off a part without damaging it, usually means you can put in the new one without damaging it as well. Just got to be careful with the where exactly you seat the wrench so that you're not stripping the bolt. There we go. So again, it did touch the plastic, but at least I wasn't giving it too much force so it didn't crack. And then it's going to be a question of a lot of wiggling. But now that I broke free, I can use a ratcheting wrench to give me a little bit more reach and speed up the whole process. The fun here is being patient, not forcing anything more than you have to, or else you end up breaking things like I did with that clip. Also, depending on your Jeep, you probably want to have an engine skid plate, so it should give you a little bit more room. Get to a point where you can loosen it by hand, like I'm doing right now. There we go, that's off. So now it's going to be a question of wiggling the cable out of the way. So you can see the cable here on the side. It's a good sized cable. There's not much room back here. And the catch is, whichever way you remove it is basically the way you have to slide it on with the new part. So I may actually try to unclip back here and see if that'll give me a little bit more room. Feel it move, so that's a good thing. So now I've got these two 15mm bolts to remove. Once you crack them, it shouldn't be too painful. Give myself a little bit more leverage here and see if that'll help. There we go. Top one should be fun as well, just because of accessibility. Catch is, if you have a 12-point socket, you may have a little bit more options as to angle and clearances and whatnot. Trying to figure out the right turn on the tooth to get. I'm going to use the swivel head on this, give me a little bit more options. Try to anyways. There we go. So let's see if I can get this one to move at all. And they're nice and snug. So there aren't that many bolts, it's just the access that's the problem. All right, so I'm gonna get an extension and see if I can find a better angle or a wrench. All right, so we'll start with my my favorite wrench kit, my extended gear wrenches. See if that allows me just enough to just at least break free this bolt. I think it moved. So now it's hitting the casing. Try with a shorter one. Same problem with the angle. Maybe the socket will now have enough. I already like the angle more here because now I'm quite a bit further from the drive shaft. Definitely use the full length of this extendable ratchet to give me a little bit more leverage, and it's moving. So now I can shorten it down, hopefully get enough clearance to, still doesn't want to, eh? All right. Could be one of these try multiple wrenches until there's just enough play or just enough movement that you end up with the angle that you need. Okay, back to the socket. On. So the catch here is there's just enough room to put the socket, but on enough to ratchet to get to the next tooth. So depending on how fancy of a sockets that you have, you may have slightly more tooth options. Got it turned, but now it won't clear the exhaust. So let's try extending this just to give me a little bit more leverage. Hope it's turning because this is just painful for nothing. So that's just being difficult. Oh, there we go. So let's see if the ratcheting part can fit up there. Nope. Let's see if this angle works better for me now. Again, same problem as before. I get a turn or whatnot, and then it won't ratchet enough to be able to turn some more. Let's try. I may just have to find a ratchet in my garage that has more teeth. That'll give me a little bit more flexibility. It's always fun when you have to rely on multiple tools just to start something. That sounds better. So now I'm literally stuck between Alright, now I should have enough done that just about any wrench will be able to take care of the rest. So let's do the same thing with the bottom one. If I've got enough room to, I will once it's broken free. Right, that should be enough to be able to use the ratcheting side of the wrench. Alright, so that works. Alright, so let's see if I can turn it by hand now. Nope. Yes, that one's just too long. I'll go get a shorter one that ratchets. So this one ratchets just to say that it does. Still not good enough. So I'm gonna go get a stubby 3/8. That'll give me a little bit more clearance. Now time for the stubby. Between the length of the handle and the fact that it swivels, it definitely gives me a lot of flexibility in these tight quarters. Only drawback of this is when there's a lot of torquing involved, there's just not enough leverage. Definitely doing exactly what it should be doing right now. The hardest to access bolt first. That way the want to fall out. Manage. Alright, let's try by hand now. I can feel it wanted it to turn. One bolt out. Alright, let's see. The other one will be a little bit easier. Definitely have a part where I can now turn it by hand. Not quickly, but at least it turns. We drive ours off-road a lot, so things do tend to get cruddier sooner and fail. So look at all that sand. That starter out with that cable still in the way. A little bit of leverage goes a long way to get something unseated for the first time. So at least now it's starting to move. At least they were nice enough to put that in there. May help there. Let's see if I can, oops. Interesting. This is where it's getting fun because the harness or the cable that goes onto this lug is super snug against the end, and I have to find a way to pry it so that it'll slide out. And then the reason I need this to do that is that there's a huge section of the starter that's part that goes inside the transmission casing. So there's way too much here that has to be wiggled out to say I'll just let it slide off the end after. I have to find a way of getting this cable to pop out. There's very little extra cable in that area. So this is one of those perfect examples of engineering a problem by saving a tad bit of wire that would allow this to easily pop out and simplify future maintenance. So I reinstalled the bolt down here nice and taut so that the starter doesn't move. I'm going to try pushing this again, see if that moves at all. It does move a little bit, just not much. I'm trying to find a way to get the harness to give me a little bit more give. So I'm going to go get a pry bar that'll give me a little bit more leverage and see if I can push it out. So now with the longer bar, at least I have a little bit of leverage if I can get it in there. It looks like this won't really want to work. Getting somewhere now. I did bring a second pry bar. I'll try with the other pry bar instead of a flathead. See if that'll give me a little bit more leverage. The back here. Actually at the front if I'm referencing the vehicle itself. So here the catch, of course, is the harness itself does not have much wiggle room in the total length. There we go. So now I can remove this one bolt and slide out the so as you're almost done removing the bolt, just make sure that it doesn't fall and end up on your face. So I'm keeping an eye on making sure that it doesn't start shifting on me. So far it looks nice and stable. Got a little bit more sand out of there. So now it just should be just a wiggling game to get it out. And again, because my Jeep is lifted, there's lots of clearance to get it out. So here we have the old motor. So just based on the label, most likely the original one. Here we have the remanufactured unit. Sure looks very similar. Oh, there's a little clip down here that isn't on that one. I'm not sure if that made any difference or not. Clearly there was something wrong with either it wasn't spinning or it wasn't turning. Anyways, it just didn't sound right. So hopefully it's just something simple with the starter and not something wrong with the vehicle. I'll install this one. I don't have too many issues getting this cable on, so I'll take off the bolt and the lock nut washer off right away, somewhere where it's accessible for future use, and start putting this back together. So this should be relatively straightforward. Slide in the new one. Should go in more or less the same way that the old one came out. There is an alignment point on the casing right over here. So just want to make sure that it sits in there correctly. And now I'll feed in the bolts, at least a few threads, just to make sure it doesn't decide to sneak out, fall. No fun when you're changing a part and it falls on you. All right, so got a few threads there. Now I can install the top one. So because I need the cable to be as close as possible to the casing, I might as well tighten these up right now. Important part is not to jam it up sideways. So what I like to do is get the bolts in as much as I can by hand. Sometimes it's easier with the tool. And make sure that both are all snug before I start tightening it. It's definitely easier with a stubby, which is great for now, but it won't work forever. Perfect example of why you don't want to have your face right below your work area. Sometimes tools slip out of your hands. So this is where those who have fancy cordless tools can definitely take advantage of, let's say, an electric ratchet. A little far from the garage to do this because the vehicle just stopped in the driveway, but at least it did it at home and not in the middle of nowhere, which would have been a bigger pain to get it moving again. Take that as a win. So we're getting close to the right spot, so I can give it a few more turns both sides. So that's in taut, not super tight, but taut. Now the fun one, the top one. So we'll see if I get lucky. I may have to do the exact same thing or something very similar to when it was removed, of prying it over the stud. Close. So we'll see if I can push it. That's not working, which I was hoping. So let's see if I can find a different way of fixing it in. Trying to find the longer pry bar. Just trying to get the edge of the stud, there we go, lined up. Oh, there we go. Now to find the bolt, the nut, sorry, and the washer. So now I've got the nut and the washer. Lock washer first, then the nut. 13mm gear wrench. Let's see if that will work. These tight quarters. May have to rely on a different wrench just to get it in there. Old-fashioned fixed wrench. So it seems to have just the right angle to clear the connector and still seat. There we go. There, that's about same level of tight. Okay, so here's going to be the fun one because I did break the retaining clip earlier. So here the important part will be to start with getting it lined in there correctly. For some reason these cables are extremely short, so clearly it expects the whole system to be mounted and wired before being in the vehicle or the harness installed. Okay, so now it's clipped in. Doesn't feel like it wants to move on its own. Oh, it does move a little bit. So I will add a zip tie just as a bit of a backup. Just gonna make sure that I route it in a way that it doesn't pinch the wires. So from experience, if you know you're gonna use a zip tie in a tight area, try to have it pre-placed around the wire. So the fun thing of doing something like this is rounded corners don't tend to grab very well. Well, it looks like I hadn't pushed it all the way in because I just heard it click. Yeah, that's not moving. Good. It clipped in. So now it's the fun time of just reconnecting the negative. There should be a little bit of current draw as you connect it because, well, there are a lot of electronics in these things. Your cables are properly routed based on whatever accessories you have in yours. Here's my winch cable. I just want to make sure that it's going to the right spot. Good. 10mm to retighten it. There we go. So now we should be done what needs to be done outside the vehicle. Now let's hope for the best. Alright, so it still kind of did it. So I'm not sure if the problem was the starter or not. So I'll let the vehicle idle. In the meantime, I'll reset my radio to my settings. That's no fun. And after it's idle for about a minute, I'll try restarting again. By the sounds of it, maybe I have a different problem than the starter itself. So now I just have to tighten these two bolts. Of course, now that I let the vehicle idle a little bit, the exhaust is a little warm, so I got to be careful about that. And of course, space is still an issue, even more so when you know that there's some warm parts near your hands. So I'm at a point where I can barely turn this with the stubby, so I'm going to move to something with a little bit more leverage. Hopefully I can get these in a little bit tighter. That feels good. If I can get this one. Again, the exhaust is hot. Oh, I really got some good leverage with the other wrench earlier off camera. There we go. Yeah, we're good with that. So I'll see how this treats me. Hopefully it was a combination of maybe a starter issue and maybe that connection. I'll have to keep an eye on that. See if that comes back. That'll clearly tell me that there's a problem somewhere in the charging system. And hopefully this helps you. Thanks for watching.